Hi, I'm Tim Youngblood, and I've been in the industry for 30 years now. I've had the opportunity to serve as the CISO and Chief Security Officer for four major brands in my career. I've been with companies you've probably heard of. That's Dell, Kimberly Clark Corporation, McDonald's, and T-Mobile. And I was also inducted into the Hall of Fame for CISOs back in 2020. It was a great honor for me. Now I connect with the industry in unique and interesting ways. I'm the CISO in residence with Asterisk Security. I'm a full-time angel investor and also a board member. And one of the things that I do is I watch trends very, very closely. And there's no bigger trend than what we're seeing with agentic AI. And in fact, I believe in the realm of AI, agentic identity is the biggest blind spot. And I want to talk with you about it here for the next 20, 25 minutes. So I think for the last 3 years or so, we have been, attempting to make the most of AI with the greatest audience. And we had LLMs, which provided us shortcuts to research, and it could take, research that could take days or weeks now can get done in minutes and hours. And we have now entered into this world of hybrid approaches where Gen AI is combined to address complex tasks with human involvement. Now we're kind of entering this first sort of era of a new stage of AI where AI acts independently. And we've been getting progressively better at the ease of use and the benefits to business. And there are definitely some business expectations. Now, we have had this transition of collaboration with AI agents now. So we're in this era of what I consider the new digital employee. And even though you have probably seen the same stats I've seen from institutions like MIT that state 90% of AI projects are failing, we haven't seen a slowdown in the use of AI. And there are examples across all industries, but particularly in areas like retail, healthcare, financial services that are real, that are being used in production environments, working with customers, and making it a reality. And this is really mandatory now. CEOs and boards are looking for a return on investment for what they put in for the last 3 years. And you see CTOs and CIOs reacting to that, right? And getting to sort of bottom line deployments and looking for quick return on value for what they're doing, right? And they're looking in focus areas where they can have the biggest bang for their buck, like in customer service, ops, sales, and even in fraud reduction. And these are all tangible efforts, and it really hones in on why it's important that this becomes a new expectation in most large corporations today. And as security executives, we have to respond to that. We have to support it, right? And I know initially when we went through this era of Gen AI, there was a knee-jerk reaction to try to block everything, and that obviously doesn't work. So how do you enable this and do it in a secure way is the real challenge. But first you have to really kind of understand, okay, what is AI and agentic AI really doing? So when you think about that, agentic AI is taking, the same processes and actions that a human would, right? So if you were to think about how you would bake a cake, for example, or how you would chop wood, you would take, the same steps of, input, thinking through it, having a plan, acting on that, and then some specific outcome. And AI agents think in that same way. They try to mimic the same approach. And you see that through the ability for an AI agent to sense, plan, and reason from what they're collecting, and then take some action on that without a human being involved, and then learn from what happened with that action, and then start all over again. and it's the closest thing we've had to sort of real human interaction without a human actually having to focus and drive the technology itself. As you can see, not all agentic AI is created equal, right? We've been going up this sort of scale here of having really manual processes that may have some AI in it, where the human is actually conducting most of those efforts, and going down to end goal of having full automation, which honestly we're not seeing that everywhere yet, right? The closest thing we have to that, of course, is I think autonomous vehicles. And when you look at the scale of it, it's really on it's probably on a level 4 and not quite at the level 5, where you can't set an autonomous vehicle without some type of monitoring and some human to be able to correct itself. Most of what we see, I think, in enterprise today is really hitting in this level 2, level 3 arena, and it's different than I think what we saw sort of this last cycle, where it was more on a level 1, where we saw small scale bots, some small automation with RPA, and now we've got this era where we're combining cognitive like abilities, right? And the machine learning is helping for the ANA agents to improve on itself as it goes. So we're in this level 2, level 3, which unfortunately introduces a new type of risk, risk that we have not seen before. And we're seeing these areas of concern happen with data leakage, vulnerable APIs, expansion of malware now. The ease of use of deploying these things makes it easy, to create shadow AI, where there's not any governance or oversight to it. So these are all evolving as AI agents come into the enterprise, and it's something, of course, that falls directly into the lap of the CISOs today. Now, when you look at AI agents, the way to make them most effective and how companies are getting the most out of them is to create an ecosystem of agents, or what's called a multi-agent system. And in this arena, you've got specialized agents that focus in certain areas like sales, or marketing, or order management, and they know and are connected into systems in that arena and know everything about it. But what makes them more effective is when you can combine those and get a specific answer out in where you have an agent sort of controlling other agents. So you have an agent of agents now. And when you involve a multi-agent system, these agents are pulling data from these other agents because they have access to these systems. And these agents are built to provide those answers. And they're using a combination of AI tools, third-party agents, that really are all the glue that make it work together. And the security challenge is steeped in this sort of dynamic framework itself. And it comes with a lot of different things that we haven't seen before. So you've got, malware exposures that are happening, on a different scale than they were, when you just had sort of humans in the loop doing these things. Now you've got, potential data leaks. And I think, you also have to deal with potential audit violations that are happening in this space too, right? Where maybe an agent who has access to a cardholder data environment, right, can now pull information from that, connect with another agent, and provide information that's going on in the cardholder environment. Well, that is a PCI violation, for example. But I think the biggest area of abuse is in this arena of account abuse, and this is sort of the biggest blind spot when it comes to AI agents. And it's the arena where, in order for the agents to be able to connect into these data elements, connect into these apps and systems, there has to be some form of identity that's used with that. And that identity, of course, can be used by threat actors to move laterally throughout an environment. And just imagine an agent being taken over by a third actor who now has unfettered access throughout the entire agent ecosystem. And they don't just have access to your CRM. Now they have access to your supply chain. They have access to all your key financial systems. And so that's a huge unknown risk that is something that CISOs have to deal with today that they haven't had in the past. Now, when you look at this identity risk, right? Because it's clear to me that AI agents equals identity risk now. Because the only way agents are working is because they have access to different identities that allows them to make all these connectivities. And the system consists of all things that allow app to app connectivity. Think of service accounts, think of OAuth tokens, think of webhooks, think of API keys, secrets. I mean, all of these are different types of identities, also known as non-human identities, that allow this connectivity. And the agents are designed to connect with whatever means necessary in order for it to get to the data or the information that it needs. The problem there is that, hey, there's just little accountability there, right? Because it's not like you have an employee who has, their identity that's logged, and there's some ability to track and do what they're saying. And in this regard, there's very little tracking that's happening in most cases. And so it leads to all the other issues that we talked about. So, the driver for a lot of the data leaks, the malware exposures, all the over permission, it all kind of starts in this arena of non-human identities that are being leveraged by AI agents. So I talked about kind of the shadow AI agent perspective of this, right? So this is something that is definitely a driver for the new security landscape and risk profile that we have today. And if you've got a medium to large scale environment, you probably are using some of these agent types you see here. I wouldn't be surprised you're not using all of them to some degree. This is a really good example where there was a customer assessment that looked to see, okay, where could agents be? And here there was a discovery like 56% of the agents that were discovered were in the Microsoft Copilot arena, right? And so, and it's because of the ease of deployment, with that particular platform. They made it very easy to click and develop, an agent to go out and perform a task. But unfortunately, again, there's not much governance around that. I've been in a situation where there was a client that thought they had maybe a dozen of these agents in their environment, but after an assessment and scan of this, they found they had hundreds of them. So that just tells you just how easy it is, for these things to be created, and that it is kind of a new risk. If you look at the characteristics of how this is different, right? Like we've had the non-human identity issue, for a while. That's been out there, right? And this is putting non-human identities on steroids. There's been a baseline sort of assessment that for every 1,000 employees, there are 40,000 non-human identities in an environment. And, with AI agents, it's now becoming another category of non-human identity, basically. And it's a new challenge for CISOs to address. And when you add in the aspect of the multi-agent, environment, it's really difficult to control this. And that nature of connectivity on demand by an AI agent who can do this at the discretion of how the agent operates is why CISOs have to start to build guardrails, around this technology. And, here's just some examples when you ask yourself, like, okay, isn't this just the same thing? No, this is something that is different. This is a new profile of risk that requires, some some new approaches to how we're going to address it. Even the OAuth top 10, which the initial LLM top 10 came out a year ago, and then we've got the generative AI version that recognizes that NHIs are a driver for agentic AI security, right? The other aspects you need to be aware of that OAuth calls out, includes this tool misuse, right? Privilege compromise, spoofing. These are all things that are now new risks that need to be addressed. And what you do with an AI agent really is identifying kind of the profiles of its purpose. And part of that, you have introduced these other aspects that now have to be addressed by security and how we control that. Just imagine if you had an AI agent in your environment that got hijacked and it had the dynamic access and could be used now for, unintended use. What do you do to address this thing? How do you control it? Who's responsible? I mean, these are all kind of new questions that have evolved, over really the last 8 months or so. So when I look at this, I try to define like what are some solutions, what's some steps that we can take to start to get this under control before it gets out of control. And governance is really the leading piece to it. You've got to focus in on identifying some logical steps to understanding where do we begin with this risk, and then how do we understand the entire scope of it. And there's steps to take control of an agentic world. So you first have to think about asset management, right? That's really at the top of the list. You cannot control what you can't see or what you can't count. And understanding that inventory of AI agents is number one. So you've got to have some way of going in and assessing, okay, where all the AI agents are, and then how do we define who has ownership of those AI agents, and then how are they actually being built, right? Are they being built as part of the development process? Are they being built on the fly by business units? Where do we go to get to the source of this, and then how do we sort of corral that so that we kind of have control over what these AI agents touch? The second thing has to be focused around the connectivity. What is the connectivity map for the agent, right? So how do you begin to understand what an agent can request, and what are those privileges it's allowed to do, right? As well as what types of accounts are they using to get the results that it's expected to get, and are there third parties that are also involved in that? So that connectivity map is really critical in trying to control and corral this problem. And then I think you really have to look at the threat profile of the behavior of agents in the environment, right? So what does normal look like, and how do you monitor for policy violations? This anomaly, behavior anomaly aspect is really critical so that you know what normal is. And it's probably one of the toughest things to do in trying to tackle this problem, particularly when you have an agent that is continuously learning, right? So that behavior could be changing constantly. And I think an aspect of that is trying to understand, what bad behavior is, and then when that agent goes outside, what bad behavior is, and what are the policies that you want to have in place that have to be enforced when it comes to agents. And you've got to take some time to go through and identify that and determine, how do we enforce these policies, and then even to what tools are we going to allow these AI agents to use in order to accomplish the task, right? There may be some tools that are considered open source tools that in your environment are considered unacceptable, but an agent may think that's the best way for it to get an answer. So you have to be able to control that. I think lastly, it's really about establishing an AI agent, system development lifecycle, right? And how is security in the forefront of that development lifecycle? What does agent retirement look like? And as agents are trained, how do you monitor for the new logic of what an agent can do? And so that entire lifecycle management is critical, just to have some process around that. And how do you drive, agents through that process from birth to grave, right? And this is, at least an initial step to kind of figure out what does governance look like for AI agents. And there are a multitude of, I think, tools you may be able to use to get started. There may be some that may be specialty in these areas that can help, and there may be tools definitely in-house that you already have to help you categorize this and put it into place. Now, I think some key takeaways here is, you know, understanding, three sort of core areas to start with when it comes to AI agents, right? And the abuse of AI agents, and what are the things you need to kind of think about. And governance, tech, and operations are definitely three areas that you should go back and talk to, your partners and your leaders about when it comes to this, right? And what does agent success look like, right? And from a security perspective, how do we all define and align to that? I think ultimately that ownership piece is really important, right? You're going to have a piece of technology that is a digital employee, but that digital employee needs to report to someone. So there has to be some level of accountability and an ability to measure value, right? As far as like, is the value of this worth it to the company, or is it introducing more risk than it's worth? Then I think you also have to understand what are kind of the underlying countermeasures you need to protect the agentic ecosystem. What does that technology look like? What are the layers to protect the things that an AI agent may use, when it comes to LLM, data, or other AI tools? MCP is a very common ecosystem that is evolving today, and there are specific sub-challenges in that environment that also need to be addressed, particularly when it comes to connectivity and identity. We need to start to define what that looks like, and how do we create a map of what's acceptable tools in the environment that have a security seal and expectation to them that we can drive. And then I think lastly, the operations piece, what are some new tools that you need to support the objectives for AI agents, right? And how do you make them really operationally capable, right? When you have something in operations, something that's touching customers, how do you make sure that it's audible? How do you make sure that, you can trust the logic of what it's doing? Again, what are the guardrails that need to be put in place to make it happen? We got a lot of stuff in front of us to deal with, and I'm really excited about where this is going to take us, because I think there's some great use cases for AI agents in security that are now being driven, but we got the same type of risk we have to deal with what we use in security that the business uses. So I want to thank you for this time. We are heading into this new era together. The way we used to secure the environment is not the way we need to do it going forward. We have to come up with new ways. And there are no silver bullets, but we have to have really intentful strategies of how we mitigate these risks. And I think it's a situation where, it's not just the CISO, it's the entire organization that has to be involved in supporting policy that keeps the entire company safe. Thank you.